This conference will now be recorded. Yes. Anyone, any questions, guys, before we get started? Anyone, any questions that I can take? So yesterday we were looking at how do you go and install the module, and what all do you need to go ahead and let's say install the module out here, and what are the different options to go ahead and install the module out here as such. So these are the couple of things that we are let's say really looking at. So yes, anyone, any questions? Any questions that I can really take out here?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, yesterday we are going to install that module through the command.
Okay.
It was taken around 20 minutes, but I
Yes.
couldn't find any additional folders in that module
Okay.
program files.
Okay.
Is
Did
that
you try? Yeah. Did you
yeah,
try
please?
installing with that installer, the MSI installer that we are talking about? Did you try with that approach?
Yeah, uh, 1 minute.
Yes, anyone, any questions, guys? Until let's say Kalesh looks at that. Any more questions here?
Sir, I have also same problem.
Okay.
I have
Yes.
also
I
same.
install the, I try to install the all modules as your guidelines, but
Hmm.
after I download, there is no modules in the particular file.
Yes. So after that, if you do not really find that out again, could you please try the second option, which is the MSI installer? So there is an installer basically that we had. So please download that installer and please go via that approach if the command is not really working.
Okay, sir.
Yeah,
All of
definitely.
that, sir, it works.
Yes. Yes. Any more questions, guys? Yes. After that, it will install the AC modules. There is a NuGet option. Yes. I'll firstly ask you to download and install NuGet. Once that's done, just say yes, yes, yes to all and all these things out, and then it'll go ahead and install the modules out here. But yes, in some cases, I do agree that the command really doesn't work sometimes. So in that case, you can go ahead use the installer, the MSI file, to go ahead and let's say download and install those modules out here as such. Yes, downloading manually it is working. Yes, that's let's say the safest option. But command line normally works out. In case if it doesn't, you can go ahead and use that particular second option out here as such. All right, so let's get into PowerShell today. Let's open my PowerShell. So until now, we've been looking at, let's say, for loops, for each loops. We're understanding different concepts like pipelines, how do you filter and all these things out, right? Now it's time for us to go ahead and start applying all those concepts onto a cloud like Azure. We'll understand how do you use a for loop onto Azure, how do you use a for each loop onto Azure, and so on and so forth. But before doing all these things, the very first thing that I need to do is I need to connect with my Azure portal using PowerShell. Firstly, I need to establish a connection with my Azure portal using the PowerShell out here. And in order to do that, what I need to do is that I need to now start running a command called either login hyphen AZ account. So login hyphen Azure account, AZ in short form for Azure, or I could say something like connect hyphen AZ account. So either login hyphen AZ account or connect hyphen AZ account, one of these things would work. Anything is okay. So if I just go and say connect hyphen AZ account, what this is going to do is that this is now going to open a pop-up telling please go ahead and sign into your account, and my account is already signed in, so I say go ahead and sign in here, and this will go ahead and help me log in inside my account out here as such. Now one quick heads up, guys, is that for the very first time that when you go ahead and let's say do a connect hyphen easy account, it will give you an error telling that unable to acquire the tenant and all that stuff. In that case, please make sure to run a command called connect hyphen easy account space hyphen tenant ID. Just say tenant ID. Go to your account. Go to your portal.azure.com and firstly get your tenant ID out here. How do I get that? I'll just go into Azure Active Directory. I'll just go that I'll just go and get this tenant ID, which is this one. So copy this out and I'll paste it out here and run this out. And this is now again going to ask you to sign in. And once you sign in, right, it'll also ask you for the OTP that is coming into your account. Like it'll just send, let's say, an OTP to your registered email address. Just take that, paste it here. In my case, it doesn't require an OTP because my device is already signed in. But if it's a new device and Azure doesn't recognize this out, the very first thing, the multi-factor authentication will kick in, and it'll ask you to, let's say, go ahead and sign in using your OTP out here. And once you do that, from the next time, it's not going to ask you. So for the very first time, please do connect-easy account if it works good enough. If it doesn't, which 99% of the times I saw that it doesn't, please say hyphen tenant ID. Take the tenant ID from your Azure Active Directory, paste it here, and then run the same command again. And you should see a response something like this, telling account is classes Azure DevOps who's logged in. Subscription name is Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, the tenant ID, and so on and so forth. So this is the very first command that you go ahead and run to
Kiran, I have a
connect to the Azure portal. Just a second. To connect to the Azure account out here. As in when you do that, you should be able to see all these outputs out here as such. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I'm using a different ID, let's say Visual
Mm-hmm.
Studio, right,
Mm-hmm.
and install the plugin, PowerShell
Okay.
plugin, I
Okay.
can run these commands. These commands will work on that as well.
Yes, this commands will work on that as well.
Okay.
All right, so let's do a let's clear screen. And the very first thing that I want to do is that now I've logged into the Azure portal. And once I log into the Azure portal, I now want to go ahead and check what are the existing resource groups that are there on my Azure portal. So I'll say check for RGs. Resource groups. In order to do that, what I need to do is I need to get all my resource groups. This is what I need to do. I'll say I'll say get all my resource groups out here. In order to get that particular resource groups, the command here again is a get hyphen. Anytime you want to get something, yesterday we were trying to get services. So I said get hyphen service. If you want to get the execution policy, it says get hyphen execution policy. In my case now, it's get hyphen AZ, which is Azure, and I want to get the resource groups that are running in, let's say, Azure portal. So I'll say resource group. So now I'm telling, okay, fine, please go ahead, get me something called as a resource group. And if I go ahead and run this command out, this is going to go ahead, use those credentials that you have just logged in with and start talking to the Azure cloud. And now it gave a null output, which all likely means that I might not have any resource groups that is there in the Azure portal, which is true. I do not have any resource group on the Azure portal. And now it's telling me, okay, fine, you know what, you don't have a resource group. So I'm not displaying anything out here as such. Now, if I want to create a new resource group, this is just a get, let's say get command to get the resource groups out here. If I want to create something, create a new RG, command here is a new hyphen. So let's look at all the basic commands first, and then let's say see how do I write an end-to-end program for multiple commands out here as such. So it's a new hyphen az resource group. I'm telling new hyphen az resource group out here. And in order to create a resource group, you will need two things. One is the name of the resource group. Second is the location of the resource group. So if you go into the portal also, just say create, it's going to ask you what is the subscription. Subscription is already set while you do, or subscription is already, let's say, was set out while you go ahead and let's say do a connect-easy account. So I am not really concerned about the subscription. I'm working under the context of this particular subscription. It's asking me for the name of the resource group, and it's asking me which location you want to create this resource group under. So I'll say new hyphen is the resource group space hyphen the name. name of the resource group that I want to create. So I'll say some name telling it is PowerShell RJ, and I'll say hyphen location, and I can go ahead and give a location like is US2. You can give an uppercase, lowercase, shouldn't be an issue. But I'm giving it in quotes because I also have spaces and etc. And if I do that, if I do have spaces and all these things out, it's always a suggested method to go ahead and give it in double quotes or a single quote. Anything works. Even if you don't give a quote, it will still work. If you have some spaces and so on and so forth, right? That's when it'll start to fail. So make sure you give it in quote so that it's always a suggested practice. And if I go ahead and run this out, now I'm going ahead and asking Azure to create a new resource group, not from the portal, but from the PowerShell terminal. And it took Azure a second to go ahead and say that, you know what, I have created a new resource group out here with the name called PowerShell RG in this particular location. Provisioning status is succeed or succeeded. The ID of the resource group that it ended up creating out here as such. So it went ahead and it used a couple of things out here. Sorry, it went ahead. It used, let's say, the connection, or it used the commands that I have given. And if you go back to your portal and just refresh the screen, now I see something like a PowerShell RG out here as such. I did not create it on the portal. I rather came through or came via my PowerShell script and went ahead and provisioned a simple resource group out here. So get hyphen AZ resource group to get that particular resource group out here. New hyphen AZ resource group to go ahead and create something. Again, if you look at this, let's say new hyphen AZ resource group. Now this is something that we have to do. This is something that we all have to do to understand the documentation. If you see new hyphen AZ resource group, it takes you to the learn.microsoft.com. Let's go here and let's check this out. You have examples wherein it's going to tell you what is the simple syntax. Now it's telling create an empty resource group using a positional parameter. New hyphen is resource group. It's telling you can also do this. It's telling, it's telling create a resource group with tags. You can also do that. Multiple things out here in the examples. And if you want to check the documentation for get hyphen easy resource group, resource, not resource, but resource group. And if you check this out here and look at the examples, this is also going to tell you how do you get a particular resource group, or how do you get all the resource groups out here and etc. So it will also show you how do you get those things and etc. and so on and so forth. Yes, any questions still here on these two commands, and how do we go ahead get something, and how do you go ahead and create something out here on the Azure portal? So firstly login, secondly get, third go ahead and let's say create something out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions I can take till here? Just take a quick pause to see if there are any questions. All right,
So we don't
so
have any hierarchy. Let's say we are creating the resource group first, but do we need to create subscription before that, or there is no dependency at all?
no, there is a dependency. You will need a subscription existing before you go ahead and create a resource group. So subscription creation is manual procedure. You have to go to the portal, register yourself for the subscription, right? So
So
once you
what?
have the subscription,
Okay. So when creating resource group, we don't refer subscription, right? Then it takes
we did,
automatically.
we did when you did a connect. So when you
So
did a
that is
connect
tenant
here,
ID, right?
that's a tenant ID. But if you check this out, that's what I was asking you to check out. So if you check this out, and when I do that, do you see what is the subscription is now giving me right now?
Oh, the name of it. Okay.
The name of subscription. So it
But if you have
knows
multiple subscriptions, then we need to select that, or
yes, if you have multiple subscriptions, then you need to run a command called set hyphen az context and say what is the subscription name or the subscription ID. So give a name of the subscription. Again, it will fail. This command is going to fail because I don't have a subscription with the name called XXX. But if you have a subscription with that particular name, it will now go ahead and run your command under that particular context.
okay,
So
it will, okay, it will change to that subscription, and whatever you run,
exactly,
it comes under that. Okay.
it comes under that particular subscription out
Oh,
here.
okay, got it. Okay.
Yes. So if I just copy this out and let me set this out once again. and now it'll go ahead identify that I have a subscription with this name, and now it'll setting my context. So whatever commands that you run right now are running under the context of this particular subscription. That's the reason this command is called set-az context, Azure context out here as such.
Got it.
Any more questions here, guys? So let's try to apply our knowledge of, let's say, the arrays, and let's see how this really works out here. Again, in order to declare an array in PowerShell, I just go ahead say, now I'll say dollar resource group names, and I'll say equal to at the rate open close parenthesis, and here let me say that this is test1 comma test2 comma test3, so on and so forth. So I have three resource group with these three names out here, and in order to now create all these three resource group at once, I'll now start using my loop concepts. Loop concepts now come into picture. I'll now say for each loop here, I'll open up something called for each. I'll say for each name in something called resource group names, I can now start writing things like write host, say name of the resource group is dollar name, and once I do a write host, I go ahead, I'll say new hyphen az resource group. So what I'm now doing is whatever for each loop that we used earlier. So earlier when you said Kiran, Suresh and Mahesh, I said write host, my name is something. It went ahead, printed out three different things out here right now. I'm doing something similar. If you look at, let's say, the first class of PowerShell that we had, I'm doing something similar, but this time around I'm applying those loops not onto names but onto resource group names right now. I'm trying to create a different resource groups on the Azure portal. So now I'm using a for each loop mechanism. If I don't use a for each loop mechanism, what is going to happen? Let's also look at that. I'll say new hyphen az resource group. This is a command to go ahead and create a resource group on the Azure portal. I'll say hyphen name. And if I pass in the entire array, now the resource group names is an array. And if I say hyphen location, and I'll say something like East US2 is my location out here. And if I run this particular command, it simply throws an error telling that what, I cannot convert a system.object to a system.string required by the parameter called name. When it says this, very simple, it's telling that what, this name is a parameter which requires a data type called string, but I am ending up passing an array here. I'm passing the entire array list, which will not work. Why will it not work? Because this command called new hyphen easy resource group, if you go into that particular command once again, say new hyphen easy resource group, this command expects you to have a string. Here it is telling hyphen name, and here the name is a string, and the location here is also a string out here as such. So when you basically go ahead and when you look at these particular documentation, it tells you that what, this is required. Like you need to pass a string. It's a string positional parameter, and it's a string out here. So if you look at, let's say, something called name, the type here it expects is a string. You cannot pass an array. In order to now convert the same thing, I'll just go use a for each loop mechanism. I'll say for each, and I'll say dollar name in dollar resource group names. I'll just go ahead and I'll say write host, the name of the RG, and I'll print out what is the name of the resource group that I'm creating, which will become dollar name. I'll take this entire command, get it inside my loop, and instead of using dollar resource group names, I'll just say dollar name. This is what I'm going to do. And if I just go ahead execute the entire thing, now it's telling name of the RG is test1, and it is trying to create a test1. It's not just printing out a name, it's trying to create that particular, let's say, resource group. and then it's going to the second resource group, printing out the name, and then going to the third, printing out the name, and also going ahead and creating something out here as such. So if I go back to the portal, again there is a slight delay in the response mechanism of the portal out here because of my browser cache and a couple of things out here. So if you give it a couple of refreshes, or give it like say about a minute or so, and refresh your screens, you should be able to see those three resource groups created in that particular location called EastUS2. So now I have test 1, test 2, and test 3 that are now created as a part of that particular region called EastUS2 out here as such. Yes, any questions?
Yeah, I have one question, Kiran.
Good, please.
Um, um, do we need to run the tenant ID and set the context every time, or it is for
No,
the session?
it's for the session.
So if you close
Uh,
the terminal, for example,
mhm.
then the session will end and you need to do it again.
See, what happens is that your PowerShell has something called as a caching mechanism. So
Yeah.
though it is said that the credentials are stored per a session, even if you close and reopen your session once again, the cache is still maintained. So you can just simply go ahead and run your commands, and it will still
So
work. And
cache for the
mhm.
credentials or cache for the memory? I mean, memory storing the variables and values.
No, cache for the credentials. PowerShell will also cache your credentials out there. So all your
Okay.
credentials are also cached. So once you want to, let's say, log out, you can just run a command called logout-az account that will release those credentials out here as such.
Okay. So if you close it, I mean, it will not remove the
No,
credit.
it won't remove the session out there. You can still open it, and you can continue where you have left it out here as such.
But the values of the variables will remain only for that. Those will be stored in memory, right? When you close and
Correct.
open it.
Those will be stored in the memory of the session. So if you close it and then reopen your session, right, those variables will not anymore be in the memory. So
I
you'll
think
again have to come to the
in the
memory out
last example, you opened a new one, right? I mean,
here.
you go back to that
Yes.
code.
Okay.
So here it is, yeah, untitled 3, right? But
Mm-hmm.
untitled
Correct.
2, so untitled 3 has, okay, we have all that
Mm-hmm.
info on the top. Okay.
Yes.
You go to the top, please. Yeah. Can you go to the top? Okay, you
Mm-hmm.
have this information. Okay.
Yes.
So if you remove this, let's say
Mhm.
you copy only the code, the last code that you wrote, right? For loop for each
Okay.
loop,
Okay.
into a different file,
Okay.
into a separate file, for example.
Okay.
Okay. Untitled 4.ps1.
In the same
Will that
terminal, you
work?
mean? In the same
A
in
new
the
file.
same
Yeah.
session, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Will it work or?
Yes, it is going to work. Reason being, your resource group names is now this particular array that is stored in this particular session. So no matter how many, let's say, new files that you open, you're working under the same session host. So it's going to still work. So if I just go and run this out, it's going to still say that, what, the name of the arch is test one, because it understands that, what, you are, let's say, doing the operation in the test one out here. Again, it's saying the resource group is already exists. You want to, let's say, modify it out. But yes,
So
it's going to work.
what is the session here? The PowerShell connection or what do we call
Session
this?
here is the host. Now, this is a PowerShell session. Now, PowerShell maintains the session in the form of the output screen out here, in the output console out here. And this session is common for all these three scripts. So you have three scripts running on one particular PowerShell session or one particular PowerShell host out here as such.
Okay. No, the slight confusion is if I'm using Visual Studio Code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you will have in the upper window and lower window terminal at the lower window, PowerShell terminal.
Correct. Correct.
And similarly, like how we are showing, right? I mean, the script can be
Yes.
written in the editor on the top
Yes.
and the command
Yes.
we can run in the terminal.
Yes.
So in that
Yes.
case, you can create multiple terminals, which means
Correct. You
multiple
can create
sessions.
multiple
They're
terminals.
all
Mm-hmm.
sessions.
They are all sessions that are running under the same, what do you say, under the same VS Code host. Basically, again, if you are even running it on a VS Code, if you are creating multiple sessions,
Hmm.
it's just creating multiple instances of PowerShell in the background. So it's again
Okay.
using the same PowerShell out there.
So
So until unless you kill the sessions, your memory won't be erased out there as such. So you
now
can try it out.
if I
Mhm.
open three terminals, PowerShell three terminals,
Okay.
the
Hmm.
Visual Code. and
Okay.
I wrote the same example in the first one and then closed it. In the
Mm-hmm.
second one, will I get the same result or it
I'll
is
have
any?
to check that on VS Code. Like I haven't really tried it on a VS Code session, so I'll have to check to see if that's really persisted on a VS Code out here as such.
All right. Okay. All right. I will check that one. Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Sure. Is any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here? So I created 3 different resource groups in the same region. Again, if I want to do it, let's say in different regions out here, let's say I want test 1 or I want, let's say, test 4 in a different region called North Europe. I want test 3 in a different region called, let's say, or test 5 in a different region and test 7 in a different region, 3 different resource groups in different regions out there. Again, what I can do is I can just go ahead, firstly give the name of the resource groups. I'll say this is test 4, 5, and this is test 6. So 3 different names of the resource groups out here. I can also do something called locations, and I can say I can give 3 different locations out here, like East US, West US, like Central US. And now if I want to, let's say, go ahead and execute these things out again from a for each perspective, I won't be able to do this because we saw the limitation on how a for each really works out here. And that's where I'll get in my for loop concept once again. So I'll say for, and I'll say for I is equal to 0, I is less than resource group names dot count, and I can say I plus plus in here. I can now start writing the right host statement telling that right host attempting to create a resource group with the name. I can give that particular thing called dollar resource groups dot dollar I in a location, and I can give something like dollar of dollar locations and then I out here as such. So I'm writing the statement telling that I'm trying to create this out, and in the next line I can say new hyphen here's at resource group. I can say the name of the resource group again would be resource groups dollar I, and the location in which I want to create this in, I'll say dollar locations dollar I out here as such. Same thing what I wrote earlier. So earlier I said my name is Kiran, I belong to so and so location. So I had 2 different arrays and I was iterating over those 2 different arrays out here. And in the case of PowerShell or in the case of Azure PowerShell right now, I'm just taking those 2 loops and I'm just going ahead and creating these particular resources, not just running those loops. But now if you see, so attempting to create the RG with the name called test in East US, attempting to create the RG with, let's say, test 5 in a location called West US, attempting to create RG with a name called test 6 in a location called Central US out here as such. So the same for loop, the same for each loop conditions that we were using in the first class. So that's the reason I was telling that, what, we need the basic of for and for each loop so that we can go ahead and, let's say, move forward with this particular concept. So the same for and for each loop, what I was doing, what I was, let's say, understanding how to write it, I'm now trying to apply the same thing onto a cloud called Azure. And in this case, it should have created 3 different resource groups out here. So let's also check that. Let's also check our portal in a minute and let's see how it got created. So let's go into our portal and let's refresh our portal out here. And now I have a test 4, test 5, and test 6 created as a part of East US, West US, and Central US. 1, 2, 3 were created as a part of East US 2 out here as such. So this is how I went ahead and I created these resources out here as such by using my PowerShell commands out here as such. Again, I'm just applying the concept of for and for each loops. I'm just taking what for is, what for each is, and I'm now trying to apply the same thing onto a cloud like Azure to go ahead and, let's say, create all these resources out here as such. Yes, any questions that I can take till you?
Yeah, simple one. I mean, without
Hmm.
at the rate also for array and brackets, it should
Hmm.
work.
Should work. I mean, should work. It's a best practice to declare it in the form using the at the rate out here. Reason being, sometimes your data type will not be converted into, let's say, the array out here until and unless you explicitly mention it out.
So the location regions which we mentioned, right? East, US, West,
Mhm.
Central. So these are
Okay.
different regions within Azure.
Yes, these are different regions within Azure. Yes.
Oh, just by giving the parameter locations, it will identify and create the resource group accordingly, is it?
Yes. So it's a one-to-one mapping that's being established, right? So I'm using the index position here,
Oh, no,
and
no,
I'm
that
telling
I
it
got.
0. Mhm.
We are saying we are giving an array of locations of three different
Mhm.
locations.
Mhm.
Those
Mhm.
are regions, right? And when
Mhm.
you are creating the resource group,
Okay.
with hyphen location
Okay.
and the value of the locations. So
Yes.
basically, it identifies ESQs as a region and create the resource group in that region.
Correct.
Similarly, Testify will identify West US and create.
Mhm. Correct. So
Okay,
it's just
so
identifying your region using your arrays out here. So I'm just
okay.
giving the array, and
Hmm.
when I'm printing it out, it's also telling where is it ending up really creating out here. So if I just split this out.
So these regions we need to give
Mhm.
exactly how Azure identifies it, right? We cannot give
Exactly.
US
You
East
cannot.
instead of
Yes.
East here.
Yes. You cannot do that. So for example, if you look at the region details, these are something that I'm giving. So I'm saying West US. So I'm saying if I'm saying West US, there is a region called West US, and that's the reason it's going ahead and creating this out. Now, if I don't give that, the command will just fail, telling that, you know what, you do not have that particular region there. So please
Yeah.
select one of the available regions out here as such. So yes, this has to be given in the exact way. Again, you don't have to give it like, East US. You can also give us, without a space. You can also declare it in lower, let's say in the lowercase. Let's say it is that should also be fine out here as such.
Kiran,
Good, please.
Kiran, can we use the if condition and the test case use case will be if
Mhm,
if the resource group already present, then
mhm.
no need to create. If the resource group not present, then only it will. Can we use the if condition like that?
Uh, Good question. Can you use the if condition like that? Definitely yes. I want my programs to be reusable, which means that question that is being asked here is that, if you run the same command again,
Hmm.
it will tell you that, the provided resource group already exists. You want to really update it. Now the question what Ramakrishna is asking guys is that, if the resource group already exists, right? I don't want to really create it out. I just want to print out a message telling that, the resource group exists. I don't want this to really come up here. So I'll just suspend this command. I'll just clear the screen out. And this is what we would like to do right now is that before I go ahead and create a resource group, I want to first check whether the resource group really exists or not. And how do I really check whether the resource group exists or not? Again, in order to check whether the resource group really exists on your portal or not, there is a command called get hyphen az resource group. So if I run this command out, this is going to go ahead and give me all the resource groups that are present on my Azure portal. So PowerShell, test 1, test 2, test 3, test 6, 4, 5, so on and so forth. It's going to give me all the resource groups that are actually there on my Azure portal out here right now. But if I want a specific resource group, I'll say hyphen name. I'll say, get hyphen easy resource group with a name called something like test hyphen 1. If I do this, this is going to only grab the details of that particular resource group called test hyphen 1. If you don't have a resource group, let's say something like test 10, if you don't have this, the command will return an error telling that, what, the resource group is not present on the Azure portal out here as such. So if the resource group is there, the command is returning some value. If the resource group is not there, the command ends up throwing an error out here for you. This is the logic basically that I want to, let's say, go into. So what I want to do right now is in this script to improvise this logic. Okay, where is that? Let's see, come here. Yes, in this script to improvise this particular logic, what I want to do is that inside the for loop, I'm now attempting to create this particular. Before I do that, I'll say get hyphen az resource group, and I'll say hyphen name, and I'll say it is resource group names dollar I. Instead of passing a name out here, I am passing test4 for the first time, test5 for the second time, test6 for the third time, because here I am passing an index value using my for loop. I'm declaring it inside my for loop out here. What I'll do is that I will use a variable here telling it is status is equal to something. I am assigning the output that I'm getting here into a value called status. And now I'll say if I'm using now an if statement telling that if the status is equal to dollar null. Null is an empty value. The status can only be an empty value if the resource group with a particular name does not exist on your Azure portal. So now I'm telling if the status is equal to null, then the if statement, and under the if I'm telling, if it is null, please say that, attempting to create this particular resource group and end up creating the same. So I'm now telling an if statement out here, telling if the status is equal to a null value. Again, dollar null is a predefined variable in PowerShell. I'm not declaring it anywhere. It's a predefined variable which equates or which equals to be null out here. So what I'm doing firstly is I'm checking whether that particular resource group exists. If it doesn't, then I'm asking PowerShell to go ahead and let's say check whether this particular status is equal to null. If the status is equal to null, I'm telling I'm attempting to create this particular resource group. Else, I'm putting one more statement called else, open and close parenthesis once again. If can be complemented by else, else can only and only be used if you have an if statement out here as such. Else condition will only get satisfied if this is not true. If the if is not true, that's when it will go or it will jump into the else loop out here. When will the if not be true? Is when the status is not equal to null. And when is the status not equal to null? Only when this particular command returns a value. And if when will this particular command return a value? When your resource group actually exists on the Azure portal. So now I can say else, and here I can write very simple telling that write host rg with the name dollar of dollar resource group name dollar I already exists, and I can give a foreground color like yellow so that I differentiate between the output logs. Now I have an end-to-end script starting from let's say two different loops, which is or two different arrays, which is resource group names and location. And then I've started to implement the looping concept out here telling for, and I'm telling firstly I'm checking the status whether that particular resource group exists. If it doesn't, only then I'm going ahead and creating this out. So now if I execute this out, test 4 exists, 5 exists, 6 exists, didn't do anything. But if I now put something like 7 here,
Kiran,
just a second. Now if I put something like 7 here and put it under something like West US once again, and then run the entire thing out once again, 4, 5, 6 exists, it gave a failure here, and now it went inside the loop, telling I'm attempting to create an RG with the name test7, and went ahead and created this out here as such. The reusability of a program. Yes, please go ahead.
so Kiran, first question is like you added test-7 and location is the mandatory parameter. If you won't give West US again, and if it is null, it won't create, it will throw error.
Yes, it's going to throw error. If the location is not there, it'll
Location is
simply
the
throw the error. Yes,
parameter. That is
yes.
a mandatory parameter. Now, Kiran,
That's good.
in the row number 12, you are taking the comparison, you are comparing with the get and actual name, and you are storing that value in the status, right, Kiran?
Correct.
Can can we write like this, Kiran? Like if get hyphen agent resource group hyphen name equals to, can
Mhm.
we use equals to there itself instead of storing that into the status
When
variable?
when you say something like this,
Yeah,
equal
will
to,
it work like that also?
it will work.
Yeah.
Yes, in the if condition, yes, it's going to work. But again, it's difficult from a maintainability perspective, meaning this command can go run into rows and rows. I can have multiple if statements out here. I can have, let's say, I can filter multiple things out here. You can have very lengthy commands, so your equal to here can be really confusing. That's the reason I'm storing it inside a value and then using that value as my argument or as my condition to check whether that particular resource group really exists on the portal or not. But yes, to answer to your question, even giving the entire statement inside the if, meaning you're telling something like this, copying the entire thing out and putting it here, still work. It's still going to work because it's the if only, let's say, considers what is the operator here that you're really checking out. Still going to work. But as a best practice, you can store it in a variable, easy to maintain for you. I mean, before you go into the loop, it's easy to maintain it out.
Mm. Okay, Kiran. So suppose, Kiran, in the status,
Mm.
right? Among today, I have uh, in a real time, I have 150 resources groups present in
Okay.
my subscription or my tenant.
Okay.
Now, every time when you are passing that resource group, test 4 means test 4
Mhm.
should compare with among 150 resource groups, and it has to come out again.
Yes.
Test 5 will come, it will
Yes.
performance will degrade, right? For every for every
Mhm.
resource group, it is comparing with existing 150 resources.
Yes.
How we
Yes.
can do that improvement?
Improvement can be done using some parallel logics. You can implement some parallel logic in your script by opening up multiple PowerShell hosts out there. Will talk about that in advanced PowerShell scripting out there, as in how
Oh,
can you
okay.
really do that. But yes, you can implement a parallel logic out here within PowerShell.
Okay.
Yes, any more questions,
There was
guys?
some error message, right, in the previous execution.
Yes, there was an error message. Reason being, let's see that. Good question. Reason being, if you do not have a resource group already existing on the portal, and if you're trying to get the same thing, for example, in this command, this is what I was doing, this is what I was explaining, is that if the resource group is not there in the portal, it is bound to throw an error telling that, you know what, this particular resource group is, it doesn't really exist out there, and it's bound to throw the error. The command is bound to throw the error. That's how the command really works out. And that's the reason what really happened out here is this: I added a test 7 into something called westus, and I was trying to run this command. For 3 times it did run properly. It said 4, 5, 6 already exists because I got something in written, but that seventh resource group is not there on the portal. So I'll throw the error and then check for the condition. Yes, I agree with this. This can sometimes be misleading. Errors can really sometimes be misleading out here. I know for a fact that I will get an error here if the resource group on the Azure portal does not exist. But I'm also handling the same thing using the if else loop. So if I don't want any of my command to throw an error, I am intentionally asking my command not to throw the error. I can give one more additional parameter here telling error action. Please silently continue. If I do this, and now if I put, let's say, something like test 8.
So it's exceptional handling or error handling?
This is not error handling, this is error suppression. Error handling comes into picture when you use something called as a try catch mechanism or something like that. So this is just suppressing because I know that I am considering, or I know that I'm, let's say, treating the error later, telling if else, and then into the else loop I'm, let's say, telling it it's existing. If it's not, I'm creating it out. So this is nothing but an error suppression. It's, let's say, the default action of PowerShell is to go ahead and throw the error if something is not there. But sometimes errors can be misleading, and if you want to avoid those particular errors because of this particular command intentionally, I can use this particular silently continue out here as such. And once if I do that, and I'll just go ahead and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fine. I'll have to put one more location here. Let's put one more location. Central US.
Because the
And
resource group test 4, 5, 6 are already created, so you are not getting that error, right? So, and 7 is the new one.
7 is a new one, and 7 it did not really get 7. But in this case, if I now run this out, it's just going to understand 4, 5, 6, 7 already exists. 8 is not there. Now it's telling 8 is not there. Do not throw the error because I have a command asking it not to throw the error. And then finally I created 8 in central US out here as such. So how do you pass the command? Kind of matters. Here I've passed it along with something called as an error action parameter out here as such.
Hello, sir.
God please.
Sir, in the location for suppose text 4, text 5, text 6, text 7, text 8, sir. Text 8 was location central US. The
Correct.
central US is not mentioned. How do program work?
So if central US is not mentioned, so for example, let's say if I do test 9 and I don't mention any location here. So I'm doing test 9 here. I'm not mentioning a location. And if I'm running this out, I'll say 8, 9, 9. Simply, it's kind of failing. Cannot validate the argument called location because it's an empty parameter. It's a null value. So if you give a null value here, it'll simply fail. So you can have a check here telling if location $I is null, use a default location or use something like a default location out here as such.
So by default, there is no default location, right?
No, by default, there is no default location. It's a required argument. It's a required parameter that PowerShell expects you to pass it out.
So what is when we create a subscription and try to create in the portal, okay? When
Okay.
we try to create the resource group,
Mm-hmm.
which location? I mean, we are going to specify the location also, right? Okay.
Yes, we are going to
Let's say
specify the location also. And the last location that I created, it'll just take that and it'll tell, okay, fine, this is the last location. Do you want to again recreate it here? This is an option that is available on the portal, but not on the PowerShell. Sorry, not on the PowerShell out here as such.
okay.
Firstly, okay, Trina, does it answer your question on how the program really works out here?
Okay, sir. Yes, I understand.
Can you use strict mode on not to create, not to give out the error? Strict mode is for a different purpose altogether. Error actions is used to, let's say, go ahead and give the error and suppress the errors out there, etc. How do we add tags to that particular resource group? Good question. I'll also, let's say, answer that particular question on how to add tags. But before we add tags, I need to explain one simple concept called a hash table. So I'll do that and then explain what are tags out here as such.
Sir,
Good, please, Vinod.
that test9 also belongs to West US. How can you generate, sir?
Test9 also belongs to West US. Now, when you say test9 also belongs to West US, you either have to create here, you either have to put the parameter here called West US because you are using a for iteration. And if you're using a for iteration, it's a pure key value pair. So one let's say resource script should be attached to one particular location. So you can put it West US, and then if you run this out right now, and this is now going to, let's say, tell that test 5, 6, 7, 8 already exists, 9 doesn't. I'll attempt it to create in this particular location called West US, and it will create the same thing in West US out here as such. Yes. Anyone? Any more questions here?
Kiran, suppose if the
Mm-hmm.
client gives me the different location in suppose in different format,
Mm-hmm.
suppose text or PDF or something else or
Okay.
Excel.
Okay.
Can we take the input for this one in the locations?
Definitely yes. You can read that file, take the input from that particular file, and then start creating resource groups out here as such.
Okay. So how to take that file to the input?
We'll see that. We'll see how can we do that and etc. in the coming classes.
Okay, sure.
Cool. Any more questions, guys?
Hello, sir.
Good, please.
Sir, I personally one request your speaking is so fast, sir.
Sir, one thing that I would tell you is that as the classes progress, I'll need to speed up my pace. I cannot, let's say, continue at the same pace out there. As the classes continue, as the classes progress, the amount of speed that I need to catch it should, let's say, go up. If I don't do that, I will end up losing a lot of time out here, sir. So I'll have to go through that. My request here, please follow the same. Again, I am speaking at a very, very moderate pace. If I slow it down further, I'll end up just for my entire speech, I'll end up, let's say, wasting about half an hour. Please look at the recordings. When you go to the company tomorrow, people are going to, let's say, really speak at a very different paces out there. And anyone else who is feeling that I'm going at a very faster pace, because the amount of speed that I'm going at is a very, very moderate pace out there. So, but if anyone feels so, please let me know. And if it's a general problem with everyone, I'll try to reduce the amount, or I'll try to reduce the speed at which I'm speaking. So one thing
Okay.
again is that yes. See, one thing again, guys, is that see, I have to address questions. I can also cover the concepts out there. So I'll have to maintain a decent amount of speed. And as the classes progress, the expectation here is that the speed increases, because the concept also needs to be increased. The concept also needs to taught in that way. So if you do have an issue, please go through the video once again. You can reach out to me over my personal email if you have issues with any concept. I'll make sure to explain that out once again.
Okay.
Yes. Any more
Sir.
questions, guys? Good, please. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. Yeah. It's done.
Sure. Please try to look at those videos again. See, I understand language is a little bit of issue with you, but please make sure to try understand the same thing, because I don't want you to face issues when you go to the company tomorrow. So please try to, let's say, look at these things, and if you have any issues, let me know. I'll also help you, let's say, on writing emails and all these things out
Okay, sir.
Hello, Kiran.
here. Good, please.
Actually, one request is also from my side.
Good, please.
Actually, the guys are asking questions not related to the particular session. Actually, beyond some questions are
Mm-hmm.
asking. So please kindly keep in this mind.
Sure.
We are
Sure.
very
Mhm.
we are facing problems. Why? Because actually in between they are asking questions beyond the classes. Actually,
Okay. Sure. I
so
understand. Again,
please look into the
yes.
matter. Actually,
So, Srinivas, one quick thing here is that see, we have a mixed batch of students who are also working, who are
okay,
also
okay,
not
okay.
working. So there's a mixed batch. So I'm
Okay.
trying to establish a decent amount. So if there is a question that is out of the topic, I will ask them to reach out to me over the email, and I'll reply back to them over the email out
And
here as such. Just in case
actually, I already
if
give
it's
a
not.
chance to them. One more
Mhm.
thing, actually, I already give a chance to them to ask questions through email.
Okay.
So, kindly, people are using the chance to ask questions from outside. Actually,
Okay.
in between the class, actually, don't disturb
Hmm.
while using the ask questions out of the matter.
Sure. I will
Okay,
look into that.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so that's it from mine, guys. And in tomorrow's session, as we looked at, we'll go into the theory part of it. Like Wednesday, we'll go into the theory of it, and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, we'll again come back to PowerShell out here as such. That's the idea. So please keep practicing PowerShell. Until here, I'm good with this. Just look at the for and the for each loop concepts out here. Just follow the syntaxes, and in a couple of days, we'll again come back and address a couple of things like how do you create a resource group versus how do you create a container, and then how do you upload files inside that, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's it from mine, guys, and have a good day ahead, and we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.